and we're the proud parents of Malcolm Butler, who will graduate from Butler in 2021 with a dual degree in physics and engineering. So tonight we have about 1,000 attendees out there, so we're happy to have you all here. We will first start with our panelists who will introduce themselves in the following order: Dr. Catherine Morris, Dr. Frank E. Ross III, Mr. Brent Rockwood, Ms. Martha Jeevlick, Mr. Austin Oldham, and Ms. Rhonda Jackson. Panelists.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Kate Morris. I serve as Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs here at Butler. I am also the parent of a Butler student.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Frank Ross. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I serve as the Vice President for Student Affairs.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to be with all of you on this webinar tonight. My name is Brent Rockwood, and I'm a Butler graduate from the class of 2000, and I serve as Chief of Staff for the university. And since March, my role has been largely focused on the university's response to the pandemic. So we appreciate the opportunity to discuss our plans for the fall semester and answer your questions tonight. And thanks to the Doctors Butler for moderating the webinar today.
Good evening. Welcome, everybody. My name is Martha Jeevlick, and I serve as the Interim Dean of Students. I'm happy to say that we have a Butler graduate as of May, and I'm the proud parent of 2 more Butler students who are currently on campus.
Hi, everyone. I'm Austin Oldham. I'm the Director of Risk Management here at the university, and I'm also a Butler graduate from our Risk Management and Insurance program.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Rhonda Jackson. I am the Associate Director of Butler University Health Services. I've been a nurse for 10 years, and I've been at Butler for 6 years.
Excellent. This evening, our gathered panelists will be answering questions that were submitted in advance. The chat and question and answer functions of the webinar will not be active tonight so that we can answer as many questions as possible. We will be recording tonight's webinar, and the recording will be posted on Butler's website within the next couple of days. So with that said, let's dive right into these questions so that we can get to as many of them as possible. The first set of questions has to do with testing. When we talk about testing, Ms. Jackson, this question is for you. What can you tell us about the entry testing process? What test is being used, and what happens if a student tests positive at check-in?
So all Butler students will be required to have testing. We are capturing most of our residential students upon move-in, and then the remainder of our students, our graduate students, our commuter students, they all will have to have testing as well. So all of the Butler student community will have testing. We are using a rapid method of testing. It is an antigen-based test, and it's designed to detect the proteins that's found in the virus that causes COVID-19. We, during the testing process, you will come into Efferson Gym and check in. At that time, the students are provided with some paperwork to complete. They will complete the paperwork, and you've been given instructions that what to do if they test positive, or if they have any other questions on how to direct them to pick up their paperwork at the doghouse, their keys and things like that from the doghouse. And then at that point, they will rally on to a different, after they fill out their paperwork, they will go into the testing area. We will collect the specimens, and then the students will return to their vehicles, and we will call them in about 30 minutes with their results. We will let them know students who have tested negative will be called in to bring their helpers with them so that temperatures can be taken, because all students will have their temperature taken at the time that they receive get the test. And then helpers will consequently have their temperatures taken when they arrive back, once they have been notified that they have a negative test. And then at that point, helpers, parents and helpers, and the students is given a wristband, and then they proceed to the appropriate area to check in to go get their keys. For students who do not who test positive, They will be notified that they are positive by a registered nurse. And at that time, they will be instructed to follow the instructions that they were provided at the check-in, during check-in. If they have any questions, the nurse is available to answer those questions as far as the next steps. Students who test positive will be asked to leave the campus and to return home to complete their isolation period. However, we do understand that there may be some extenuating circumstances. So there is an exemption process in place if a student if there is a problem being able to return home. The student will be provided that information, and they will complete a form. There is an exemption team that will review that information and then provide a decision to the student. For during the year, so that's kind of going over the testing. It is a rapid test. It is a very reliable test. It is EA is one of the what we considered EAU, which is a emergency use authorizations. We have received a green light to use this type of test from the Marion County Health Department. It is also one of the tests that most governmental agencies are using for rapid testing and using in nursing homes. So we are very confident in the reliability of the test, the sensitivity, and the specificity of the test. And so that kind of goes over the testing. During the year, we will continue to do testing throughout the year as well. But the check-in, that's just some of the things to expect and check in during the move-in process. If you were to test negative, how that works, and if you test positive, how that works.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. So just to be clear, there will be ongoing testing of asymptomatic students throughout the semester?
Yes, there will be.
Okay, very good. What about testing of commuter students and those who live off campus and in Greek housing, Ms. Jackson?
Okay. Yes, so we are currently we have a test set up testing all the way every day until the 23rd. So commuter students, you don't have to make an appointment. Graduate students don't have to make an appointment. They just need to show up at the testing site, which is an Epperson gym, and they will be tested. So all university students that will be on campus will be required to test. Just to be specific, if a student receives testing prior to arrival, we will have them retest on campus arrival, because there is a possibility that an exposure could have happened from the time that they were previously tested to the time they arrive on our campus. So it's just our strategy is to mitigate risk as much as possible, and that's what we would have. We are testing all of our students who's going to be on our campus. So graduate students, commuter students, they can come and be tested as well.
Okay. Well, now let's talk a little bit about students who test positive. Excuse me. Ms. Jackson, what should families expect if their students or their students' roommates were to test positive? And will the university do contact tracing?
Yes. So if a student does test positive, we do request that the student return home, and so that they can receive the best care at home. Again, if there are extenuating circumstances where students cannot return home, we do have a building designated for isolation. And during that time, the students will be placed in isolation. They will receive follow-up care through our health services staff team and our just Butler staff. They will have meal delivery. And those students, so let's say we have a pod of 4 and one student tests positive, that student will be asked to return home. If not, if for some reason they can't return home, they will be placed in isolation housing. So the other 3, what happens to them? They will quarantine in place. So they will be asked to quarantine a 14-day period. And during that 14-day period, it's not required for them to get tested to come out of quarantine, but they will self-quarantine in place in their individual units. During this time, they will also have meals delivered to them while they're quarantining in place. So we do have a protocol set up so that we can meet not only the physical and mental and emotional needs of the students, we do have that protocol in place to care for students in isolation as well as in quarantine. There is a contact tracing team. So students are expected to fill out a daily health survey. One of the questions in that daily health survey asks if they tested positive for COVID, if they've been exposed, if they're currently exhibiting symptoms. For students who are exhibiting symptoms, we will our health services team will reach out to those students to schedule an appointment, whether it is an in-person appointment or a telemedicine visit by our medical providers here. If it is warranted that a test is needed at the decision of our medical providers, students will be able to come to a testing location that is not inside of health services, but very close to health services, and they schedule the testing and get their results then as well. But the daily health survey is what triggers the need to start the contact tracing. If a student tests positive in our clinic, then of course we're going to start that process then. But if a student, let's say as a commuter student, and they go for testing outside of health services and they test positive, this is the way that they can report that positive case, that they're positive, and then health services will reach out to them and initiate the contact tracing process. So I can tell you, we do have a pretty robust contact tracing team. We all have completed training, and we are constantly aware of the changes from the CDC, because we know that a lot of changes do happen pretty frequently. So we make sure that we are abreast of those changes. And so that we can communicate that information. So when students are placed in isolation, they are given isolation instructions, self-care instructions, what to do while they're in isolation, things to look out for. And then we do subsequent follow-ups for students in isolation and quarantine to check on them, see how they're doing, if there's anything that they need. And there's also Student Affairs has designed, there is an isolation and quarantine coordinator who will also be checking in regularly with students to help meet their needs. So there is a protocol in place to care for the needs of the students that will be placed in isolation and quarantine.
Okay. That answers several questions. So one question in particular, how will students get food when they're in quarantine or isolation?
Okay, so if they will have our meal service, will be delivering meals to them. Students will, so if they're in isolation or quarantine, they will receive a link where they can go in and fill out and prepare select their meals that they want. And then those meals will be delivered 3 times a day to the students in isolation and quarantine.
Okay. Okay. Provost Morris, will students in quarantine or isolation be granted the opportunity to make up missed assignments and tests?
Absolutely. Yeah, we have an ongoing process that has been in place for a long period of time where if a student is going to be missing class for any length of time, Health Services communicates with the Dean of Students office, and the Dean of Students office then communicates with each of the faculty members for that particular student and lets those faculty members know that the student is going to be missing classes. In this particular case, because we're in the pandemic scenario, when these notifications occur, our Dean of Students will indicate to the faculty member that per the provost's direction, the faculty member may not consider these absences to be inexcused. So faculty must consider any absences from in-person class materials to be excused, whether the student is in isolation or in quarantine. And the faculty member is specifically asked to work with the student to identify a way for that student to keep up with their schoolwork to the maximum extent possible. And our faculty have a long history of doing right by students in these kinds of circumstances, and I'm confident that they will work with the students to figure out how best to incorporate the coursework into the student's experience. Now, if the student has tested positive, they may or may not be actively ill. And if they are in quarantine, it's possible that they could become ill. So if a student is ill, then the faculty member will be working with the student to determine whether there are any sort of academic adjustments that need to be made. For example, extensions on papers or other assignments, or being able to take their exams a little bit later. We know that with this virus, sometimes people have a longer illness or maybe a more intense illness for a shorter period of time. And in those cases, the student will definitely need some additional support in terms of extensions. And if things were to get truly challenging, then we have some other mechanisms in place. We can be looking at incompletes depending on the situation. We can also be looking at withdrawals from a particular course, or there is always the full campus withdrawal for the semester, although we would hope that we would not get there. I mention it just because it is one option if things were to get more extreme.
Okay, thank you. And one final question, what will happen if a faculty member tests positive for COVID-19?
Yeah, so if any member of our campus tests positive, they will not be on our campus. And just as students are doing a daily health check, faculty and staff are also doing daily health checks before we come to work. That's been in place all summer long. So if a faculty member were to test positive, they definitely, or if they developed any symptoms prior to a test, they would not be able to come to campus. And in that situation, what we would do is a little bit dependent on whether they are symptomatic or not. If a faculty member is asymptomatic, then we would absolutely expect them to continue to deliver their course in a fully remote way during their time period of self-isolation. If they become ill, then I know that there are certain circumstances where faculty members maybe aren't feeling super great for whatever reason, and they still deliver their materials in a remote fashion. But if they're not able to do so, then that's where really the dean of that college needs to step in and help figure out what is an approach to make sure that the students don't fall behind. And there's a variety of different ways that we might do that, but we will make sure that the students do not suffer from the faculty member not being able to teach for some period of time. As we always do in all circumstances, we have faculty who are out for a variety of different reasons across time, and this will be no different than those others. We'll make sure the students are taken care of.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Rockwood, many students and parents have asked about awareness of positive cases in the Butler community as the semester progresses. Will Butler communicate statistics about positive cases?
Yes, good question. So we will be very transparent and timely with our communications about positive cases throughout the entire semester. So what we'll do, we will have a dashboard that will be available on our website that will track new positive cases every week. And these cases will then be segmented by students and faculty and staff. And just a quick comment on our process for communications. As a university, we will continue to communicate major decisions and important information via email. However, I would encourage all of you to continue visiting our website for the latest information, which includes FAQs that are constantly being updated, or you can always follow us on social media as well.
So could you also comment about scenario planning, Mr. Rockwood? What factors or metrics would cause the university to switch to online learning or to close its residence halls?
Yeah, it's an outstanding question. And I can tell you this has been on top of mind for us as a university. In fact, I was just on a Zoom meeting earlier today with about 20 university presidents where this was the primary topic of discussion. So let me talk about the approach we're taking. And unless there's a statewide mandate, there will likely not be a single factor or a single metric that will drive our decision to switch to remote learning. Instead, we are taking a more holistic approach by considering a number of external and internal factors. Some are quantitative, others are more qualitative in nature. On the external side of things, we'll be looking at the positivity rate in Marion County and the state. But we'll also be looking at the hospital capacity as well, looking at ICU bed availability, ventilator availability. And this will allow us to know if we had a serious case on campus, that those cases would have access to medical treatment at local hospitals. So there's a set of external metrics, but most of ours are internal kind of factors that we're taking a look at. And I'll quickly kind of go through those. We'll look at the percentage of students and the percentage of faculty and staff who are positive for the virus and who are in quarantine or isolation. I mentioned the positivity rate earlier with Marion County. We'll also be looking at that within our own campus community through the entry testing and the ongoing asymptomatic testing that Rhonda mentioned earlier. And what that allows us to do is to compare our campus rate relative to the positivity rate locally in the county, in the state, and then more broadly, the country as well. We'll constantly be looking at our testing capacity and our turnaround time to get test results. Rhonda mentioned our contact tracing. We'll be looking at the effectiveness and the efficiency of our ability to quickly notify, identify, and then notify close contacts and continue to slow the spread of the virus on our campus. We also have kind of isolation capacity on campus. We have Ross Hall Dormitory set aside for self-isolation purposes. So we'll be looking at the capacity as we go throughout the school year. And then other things, looking at access to supplies, PPE, face masks, cleaning supplies. And then lastly, this is a more qualitative one, but looking at campus compliance. Obviously, a lot of our success is predicated on kind of personal accountability and responsibility. So we'll be looking at things in terms of the campus community following the health and safety practices that we have outlined for the semester. And I will mention that each of those factors that I walked through have specific trigger points and corresponding kind of mitigation items that we can take as a university for additional action to mitigate the spread. So in summary, just kind of a closing comment here. And as you know, we cannot eliminate the risk of the pandemic, but our goal has been to reduce the risk as much as possible while delivering a successful in-person fall semester. And we've had extraordinary efforts from our campus community, all the individuals that you see in the call today, starting with President Danko, our faculty and staff have been outstanding, and a significant number of work groups and multiple subgroups consisting of internal and external experts across the public health, higher education, and business communities, really geared around trying to have the best available information to make the best decisions possible for our campus community.
Mm-hmm. So one final question related to this topic, Mr. Rockwood. Families and students are wanting to know, would the university refund any money to families for room and board and or tuition if the university decides to close or switch to online learning?
Yeah, great question. And I guess just a quick clarification up front is that we don't anticipate closing the university. Even last spring with the switch to remote learning and students departing campus, our campus never technically closed, and we maintained our critical operations. And this was because that we're deemed as a higher education institution, an essential organization by the state. Now, with that backdrop, getting to room and board, if we did close residential halls and move to remote learning, we would consider whether any sort of financial adjustment is warranted and feasible. That decision would be based on a number of factors, including the duration of the housing disruption. And because, as some of you know, we made adjustments to room and board billing last spring, we have a model in place right now for doing so. However, we cannot promise that we would use that identical approach. Regardless, though, what I would say is that we would want to come up with a result that is fair and equitable for all affected students and families, and do the right thing for our community members. Now, looking at tuition, some classes will be fully in person. Many will have a combination of in-person and virtual components, and a smaller proportion will be fully remote. So all faculty have worked extremely hard this summer to plan for a variety of contingencies. And if we have to pivot at some point to a fully remote instruction period, it will be with more kind of foresight and planning than obviously what we had last spring. So, point being that our courses have been built by faculty to provide excellent learning experiences and opportunities for students, no matter the modality of instruction. So as such, we do not anticipate altering tuition, even if we have to switch to fully remote instruction for a period of time over the semester.
Thank you, Mr. Rockwood.
Thank you.
Okay. Provost Morris, another question about academics. Can you please share with us a bit about the learning environment this fall? In particular, what percentage of classes are online versus face-to-face? And will classes be live streamed if a student cannot attend due to quarantine?
Thank you for the question. It's a very good question. And I want to start by saying these percentages are changing across time. And so as of the last time I did the analysis, which was last week, we were sitting at about 15% of undergraduate courses being offered in a fully remote experience, and the remaining 85% being offered with in-person components. Now, in those fully remote learning experiences, there's a variety of different reasons that a course might be fully remote. We had a number of courses that were always scheduled to be fully remote, even before the pandemic occurred. We do have some courses where we made a pedagogical based decision that it was better for the course to be fully remote. And one example that I can give for that would be our American Sign Language classes, where it's very important for people to be able to see facial expressions, and being in person with face masks would be disruptive to the ability for students to learn that content appropriately. Then we have a variety of circumstances wherein our faculty would not be wise or cannot be on our campus. And these are often cases where the faculty members have some pre-existing medical condition that puts them at heightened risk for complications if they were to contract the virus. Also situations where our faculty members live in a household with someone who has those very high risk factors. Also, as recently here in Indianapolis, a number of the local school districts have moved to fully remote education in the K-12 space, or a lot of them have moved to hybrid kind of situations where students might go to school some days, but not others. We have an awful lot of faculty members who are parents whose situation with their children has changed pretty quickly here. So we are seeing additional requests to move to fully online coming forward from faculty. So I am certain that this figure of 15% is going to increase across time. For the other currently 85% of the courses that have face-to-face components, they also have technology enhanced teaching and learning components as well. And this is because one of the things that we did this summer, and a lot of people worked really hard on this, was we remapped every single space on our campus for a new capacity that would allow for social distancing. So a classroom that used to hold 35 people probably holds about 16 now. In many cases, it's actually less than half of the prior capacity. But what we're doing there is we're making sure that all of our learning environments, almost every single one, there are a couple of exceptions, but almost every single learning environment now assures a 6-foot distance between any two people who are in that learning environment. But what that means is that faculty are teaching classes in classrooms that no longer hold all of the students enrolled in that course. As such, a lot of our classes are going to be offered in new ways that faculty haven't taught before and students haven't learned before. We're going to see much more in the way of the flipped classroom, where lecture material is pre-recorded and put on Canvas, our learning management system, and students are coming into the class for smaller recitation or discussion or problem-solving sessions, etc. And there's a variety of different ways that faculty will be able to conduct their classes. And in fact, as mentioned earlier, the vast majority of our faculty are completing an 8-week-long summer professional development program to help them learn about new ways of educational delivery that will be effective in this environment of disruption through the pandemic. It's a really significant investment on the part of our faculty. We've also made an investment in academic technology in our classrooms. And Dr. Butler, you asked the question about live streaming. In many of our classrooms, we now have live stream capacity. That's true for the majority of our classrooms, but it's not true for every single classroom. And the technology that we invested in will allow students who are remote to be able to see and hear the professor, but not to be able to see and hear their classmates. In other words, there's one microphone at the front and the video is faced at the front of the room, not 360 degrees all around the room. And it's important for me to share this with you all because what that means is there are certain circumstances wherein live streaming won't be helpful for students who are not sitting in the classroom. If it's a discussion-oriented class where people would sit in a circle, that's the live streaming capacity isn't really going to help incorporate students from afar into that learning environment. There are some cases where the classroom itself doesn't have live stream capacity. So if the classroom has live stream capacity and if it makes sense to integrate a remote student into that experience through live stream, then faculty will absolutely do that. But it won't be the case that always, if a student is in quarantine or self-isolation, that live stream will be the way that they get integrated. There may be other techniques that get used.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Ross, let's talk now about campus life.
Okay.
Families are asking about what kinds of student activities will be allowed on campus this fall. What can you share with us?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. And, we know that co-curricular activities are a really important part of the Butler student experience. And because we are going to be offering in-person residential campus experience this fall, we want to make sure that we complement what's happening inside the classroom with activities outside the classroom. But I think what's important for our students and families to understand is this will be very different. Our student life experience across the board will be very different than it has been in years past. But again, I want to underscore the importance of this programming and particularly for our entering first year students who are going to be new to the Butler experience. It's important for them to feel a sense of connection to the campus and to meet their peers and make friends. And so in particular, the programming that we do at the beginning of the fall semester as a way to make connections for our new students is extremely important. And so programming will happen in some ways similar to what you're seeing in terms of classroom modifications. We'll be having some programming that's in person. Some of our activities will be more of a hybrid or blended approach. And then some of our activities this fall will be entirely virtual. So significant modifications are being made as we prioritize the safety of our students. Many of our activities will be outside, so that will allow us to have students socially distanced, but enjoying our programs outside. For any programs or activities that are inside our facilities, just like our classrooms, we've changed the capacity of our meeting rooms. And so fewer students will be able to be in one room at a time. Masks will be required. and we'll be following all the safety protocols. But I know that our Office of Student Activities, as well as our Student Government Association, are working in tandem, planning a lot of fun and exciting activities for students. Again, many things that returning students would be looking forward to. So Block Party will be happening this fall, and I know that's always a big and important event for our students when school starts. We're going to be doing a lot of drive-in movies outside. So again, opportunities for students to engage socially, but in a socially distanced way, in a way that's safe on campus. But a lot of virtual opportunities as well. So online trivia, we implemented that in the spring semester for students, and it was very popular. So we'll continue that this fall. We'll be doing different watch parties, but we'll also be offering online escape rooms, as well as some online comedy shows, those types of things for students. Obviously, with our campus commitment to student well-being through BU Well, our Health and Recreation Center will be available for students, again, with modifications. All of our exercise spaces will be open for students. So this will be the cardio machines, the weight room, even our pool. But again, we will limit the number of students that can be in the building at one time, and students will need to make appointments prior to coming to work out to make sure that we keep a safe environment. And then we will have a rigorous cleaning regimen throughout the day to make sure that we're keeping our equipment clean and our students safe. We're also going to be continuing with intramural sports in a very safe yet limited way. And again, really taking advantage of the outside for those types of activities. And then we'll be implementing some more of our group fitness classes, but again, outside. Our Diversity Center is going to be very active this fall, as well as the student organizations housed within the DC, hosting different programs on campus, as well as a number of trainings, both in person and virtual, for all students around issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We get lots of questions about our Greek organizations and what our fraternities and sororities going to be doing this fall. And I really want to give credit to the leaders of our Greek councils who've really taken a stand in prioritizing the health and safety of all of our students. So they will be engaged in a very responsible and limited way, holding small philanthropic events on campus, small community service events, and any events that they have for their brotherhood or their sisterhood will be, again, modified appropriately and socially distanced. But we will not be allowing fraternity parties on campus this fall. One last thing that I'll mention in terms of campus programming, last year we built a new esports and gaming lounge in Atherton Student Union that's been tremendously popular. And during the spring, when we made the transition to online learning, we saw even more students getting involved. And so our esports and gaming lounge will be open this fall as well. Again, we'll have appropriate social distancing in the lounge, and students will need to make appointments. But I think that's another great opportunity for students to get connected on campus.
Excellent. So Provost Morris has spoken about modifications that have occurred in the classrooms. Dr. Ross, you spoke about several other places on campus where modifications have been made. Could you talk a little bit about modifications that have been made that are being made in campus housing in particular?
Sure, that's a really important question. Thank you. And for those families and students who have already made their way to campus in the last few days, you've probably seen some of these changes in place. All of our students who live in campus housing, and this would be either in our campus apartments or in the residence halls, will have a variety of COVID compliance rules that they'll be responsible for. But really overseeing the behavior of our students to keep our buildings safe, but also talking about different modifications we've made to physical spaces as well as policies in our buildings in an effort to reduce density in the buildings. And so, for example, some of the things that we've implemented include a new policy of no off-campus guests. So in previous years, students have been able to have friends from off campus come visit and stay and whatnot. Obviously, given this year and the need to make a change, we're not allowing any students to have off campus guests in the residence halls. And unfortunately, this year, that also means family members. So once a family member is there for the move-in process, that will be their last opportunity to be in our residence halls this semester. We're also making some modifications to capacity in our common spaces in our facilities. And so looking at our lounges for students, our study spaces, as well as the kitchens in our buildings, and reducing the number of people allowed in any of those spaces at any one time in an effort to reduce density in our buildings.
Excellent. So we have some questions about health and safety in Greek houses. Mr. Oldham, can you please explain if Butler is monitoring those plans and what types of modifications are being made in those Greek houses?
Yeah, thanks for that question. We spent a lot of time on this throughout the summer, and just a point of clarification initially, because this may not be common knowledge, but these houses are separate legal entities. They own their homes. They really operate separately from the university in a lot of functions. And while we maintain our relationship with them, and we have a relationship statement in place as far as expectations, in large part, the management of the house is operated outside of the university. But we made every effort we could throughout this summer to offer our support and our recommendations to those houses. So myself, Rhonda Jackson, Martha Jivlik, a facilities member, and our Office of Greek Life director actually walked through every single house separately. And we did a tour of those homes to make sure that we could give them recommendations that were specific to the layouts of each house. So just as we've taken careful attention to the detail of the academic spaces and our campus housing, we paid careful attention to the detail of the Greek houses as well. And we gave each house specific recommendations, especially around their living arrangements. So where a house may have had cold dorms with the beds pushed close together, we made recommendations around separating those beds, allowing for social distancing in those cold dorms, or even utilizing other spaces that maybe previously wasn't used for sleeping to make sure that there was going to be able to be social distancing in those houses. We also made recommendations around the dining aspect, whereas most of the dining spaces, it was not possible for them to have social distancing. We worked with them around schedules, around maybe offering a take and go option instead of just everybody sitting there at the same time. And then also for them to deal with guests where maybe they had students who were a part of the Greek house who lived outside of the Greek house. In the past, they would have come and eaten many meals with them and all this to begin to manage and control access to their spaces, just as we are on the university side also. So we worked with the leadership for each chapter house to give them these recommendations to help them follow the recommendations and the guidelines of the university. And we're continuing to work with them throughout the semester. And we also wanted to support those students because they're Butler students in the best way possible. And so if a student who lives in a Greek house does become COVID positive, as we've stated before, the first thing that we would like for them to do is to go home where we believe that they can receive the best care, both physically and emotionally with their family. But if that's not possible for extenuating circumstances, we're not expecting them to find some corner of a Greek house to stay and isolate in. We will offer up the university isolation spaces to those Butler students with the same set of services like dining that Rhonda spoke of earlier. Again, this is for those extenuating circumstances where they're not able to go home first, but we wanted to do our absolute best to support the Greek houses and provide resources and recommendations for them so that we can all work together to have a good semester.
Thank you.
Okay, this question is for Ms. Jivlik. How will the university enforce its rules, and what consequences might students face if they don't comply with mask wearing or social distancing?
That's a great question, and one we're being asked frequently. I think it's really important to know that we are taking this very seriously. And as I said, I'm not just saying that as the Dean of Students, but I'm the parent of 2 Butler students here on campus. They just moved back. So I have a very vested interest in how this is all being handled, both as, you know, as the Dean and then also as a parent. So to answer your question, we will always enforce the rules the way we have, and that is through our conduct process that's established and outlined, you know, in our student handbook. But when an incident takes place, we're going to meet with the students and we're going to talk about the rules of conduct. We're going to go through that with them. We're going to address what happened. And if they're found responsible, there's sanctions assigned. And that's just kind of a basic overview of our conduct process. But we expect each and every student who have signed that student agreement, no matter where they're living, on campus, commuting to campus, and maybe a senior house off campus, we expect them to comply with what they've signed. So that agreement addresses many areas of campus life. And we've communicated that message to them that if they can't or won't follow those expectations, they should stay home, because when they return to campus, we have procedures we expect them to follow in the agreement that they signed. So if they do return, we expect that we're going to enforce, they should come back knowing we're going to enforce what we've outlined. So part two of that question really is, what are the consequences that could be faced if you're a student that's found in violation of COVID compliance or really any other issues that arise? And we look at those and they're found in our handbook, but you could be looking at cancellation of student housing or maybe their course enrollment. And if that would happen, then you could be looking at, forfeiture of paid tuition and fees. So that is a significant consequence that students are facing. And so in some instances, we're going to send parent notification because we want the parents to know this as well. So students doing things on campus can have a direct impact on the family back home. And we want everybody to be aware of what's going on, because if a student were to need to leave to go home, that shouldn't be coming as a surprise to the family.
Excellent. Related to that question, Ms. Jivlik, Dr. Ross spoke to this particular question a little bit, but I would love for you to be able to expound on it on behalf of families. Will parents be able to assist their students during move-in, and can they visit their student during the fall semester?
Well, absolutely 100%. We're counting on parents to come help, because that's the part of the college experience we all love, right? But all helpers have to pass the temperature check when they arrive with their students. So anybody coming to help, parents or siblings, whoever that is, has to pass the temperature check. Each student is going to be allowed 2 helpers for the move-in, and that could be any combination. So you could have 2 parents, a parent and a sibling. You could have 2 parents in the car drinking coffee and the siblings up helping unpack the boxes. So the most important thing is once they pass the health screening, they're going to follow the process to have all of their belongings moved from their car up to their room with a moving company that the university is utilizing. So at that point, then the 2 helpers, whoever they are, will go up to the room and help unpack everything. So if that's the parents, that's great. They can do that. Visiting during fall semester, the answer is yes. Can they visit, but not the way you might think? So because we're really trying to discourage visitors to campus, that includes parents. So can they come? Yes. Can they go into the residence halls? No. So if you want to go into the room and see how the room looks and if the bed's made and if the clothes are picked up, you're not going to be able to do that. So you can hang out outside, you can go for a picnic, you can do something as a family, but you're going to have to appreciate our beautiful campus outside and look at pictures maybe provided on the phone. And then that's a rule we're expecting the students to follow. So like I said earlier, we don't want to send parent letters home to parents about the rules they contributed to by going in the hall. So we really are expecting this to be a family effort and everybody to realize this isn't a normal fall, and we all know that, and we're trying to make it the best we can, and we want this to be a fantastic experience. So we just need to kind of change a paradigm shift of what it's normally looked like, because it's not the way college has been, but we've got wonderful things planned and we cannot wait to have people get back here.
Awesome. Thank you, Ms. Jivlik.
Absolutely.
Last question for you, Mr. Holman. Will students have to wear masks when they're outside?
That's a good question. And so the short answer to that question is, if they're able to maintain social distancing from others, then no, they're not required to wear a mask. We do ask that everyone who's going to be on our campus has a mask on them at all times, because you don't know when you may enter into a situation where you'll need a mask. But I think it's important to some of the context to that question and some of these others is that we've really made every effort to work with local, state, and national health experts so that the decisions we're making are defensible in every situation. And in many situations, we are right up to the line with them, and in others, we actually go beyond them. This is one of those decisions that we decided to be right in line with Marion County Health Department, that we're not going to require people to be wearing them outside if they're just walking through campus with no one else around.
Very good. Thank you. We do have a few minutes remaining, and we were wondering if there were any final thoughts from any of the panelists that they would like to share with our families. Dr. Ross.
Yeah, I'd be happy to jump in. And one of the topics we haven't talked about tonight is food on campus. And I know this is an important topic, so if I could take just a few minutes to address that. For families who had students on campus last year, you got to experience the amazing and delicious food of our new dining partner, Bon Appetit. And so they have been tremendous partners with Butler in planning for our return this fall semester. Similar to all Butler employees, our dining staff also have to go through a daily health screening as well. And in addition, we'll be taking temperatures of all dining employees when they come on campus for their shift. But let me talk a little bit about what the dining experience is going to look like so that our students can get a sense of what they're going to be experiencing. So masks will be required in all of our dining and retail facilities. And obviously, if you're sitting down and eating, that would be, you would take your mask off. But as you're entering the facility, as you're getting your food, as you're paying for your coffee, that type of thing, we are requiring masks, obviously, and we're asking students to maintain appropriate social distance between other students. We're going to really be heavily utilizing takeout options this year. And so this is something that we implemented last year, really to help students who have busy schedules, that it might be easier for them to grab lunch while they're there for breakfast. So some students would grab to-go options and take with them. This year, we're doing it to give students more opportunity to take their meals with them and either eat them outside or elsewhere on campus or even in their room. We will be implementing a new online ordering platform that will allow students to order food and beverages ahead of time. So that will minimize students' need to actually be in the facilities if they don't want to be. We're also, I know Starbucks is a popular destination on campus, and we're going to have opening up our delivery window outside of Starbucks so students can come right to the outside of Atherton Union and get their coffee or favorite pink drink to go without even entering the building. Obviously, we are doing everything we can to lower the density in all of our dining facilities. And so we have removed furniture in all of our dining as well as our retail locations. So we maintain an appropriate number of people eating at any one time. But we've also then increased seating in other areas of the campus. So we've added additional seating across Atherton Union for students to have their meals. And we've also added seating outside the perimeter of Atherton Union. So again, more options outside for students if they want to take their lunches or their dinners with them to go. We've also removed all the self-service stations. So this fall, unfortunately, students won't be able to go up and make their own salads or get their own beverages. And again, this is an important safety modification to keep everyone safe. We have obviously enhanced cleaning protocols that we've put in place, and we're going to be disinfecting everything in all of our facilities every 20 to 30 minutes. And so that's something that we're committed to across all of our dining and our retail locations. We're also implementing what you've seen on the floors of many restaurants, directional signage. So there is one way in and one way out. And as you go through the different stations in our dining facilities, it'll have arrows so students will all know which way to go. We're also going to rely more heavily on prepackaged meals this time. So again, instead of having the beautiful, robust salad bar that our students are used to, Bon Appetit is going to make some delicious salads. They'll be prepackaged for students so they can take them with them. The last thing I'll mention is we're going to be relying more heavily this fall on disposable plates, bowls, cups, as well as individually wrapped utensils. Again, all in an effort to keep our dining experience safe for our students.
Thank you for those updates on the dining options and what you put in place to make sure we have a safe environment as we eat our meals. Thank you, Dr. Ross.
Absolutely.
We do have a minute or two. Are there any other final thoughts or comments any one of our other panelists would like to share with families? Well, thank you.
Well, we would like to thank our panelists this evening, and we speak on behalf of parents. I think many parents are pleased with the information you've provided, so we appreciate what you've done here to provide parents opportunity to send in questions and to get your responses to them so that our students will be safe and healthy throughout the year. We want to thank all of the participants in the webinar this evening, and we want to remind you that within 48 hours, this video from these proceedings will be uploaded to the Butler website. Also, we encourage you to take a look at Butler's COVID-19 website and frequently asked questions, and that's updated regularly. And thank you all again for joining this webinar, and have a great year with your students, and go Bulldogs.
Thank you.
Bye.